A detective turns over a picture of a guy inside Shinola, and he's like, "So that's not you?" I look. I said, "No, that's not me." He turns another paper over. He said, "I guess that's not you either." I picked that paper up and hold it next to my face. And I said, "This is not me." I was like, "I hope y'all don't think all black people look alike." And then he says, "The computer says it's you."
The thing we must keep in mind about Robert Williams' case is this is not an example of one bad algorithm. Just like instances of police brutality, it is a glimpse of how systemic racism can be embedded into AI systems like those that power facial recognition technologies. It's also a reflection of what study after study after study has been showing. Studies I've conducted at MIT with Dr. Timnit Gebru, Deb Raji, studies from the National Institute for Standards and Technology showing that on 189 algorithms, right, you had a situation where Asian and African American faces were 10 to 100 times more likely to be misidentified than white faces. You have a study, February 2019, looking at skin type, showing that darker skinned individuals were more likely to be misidentified by these technologies. But I want to also point out that while we are showing examples of misidentifications, there's the other side. If these technologies are made more accurate, right, it doesn't then say accurate systems cannot be abused. So when you have more accurate systems, it also increases the potential for surveillance being weaponized against communities of color, Black and brown communities, as we've seen in the past. So even if you got this technology to have better performance, it doesn't take away the threat from civil liberties. It doesn't take away the threat from privacy. So the face could very well be the final frontier of privacy, and it can be the key to erasing our civil liberties, right? The ability to go out and protest. You have chilling effects when you know Big Brother is watching. Oftentimes, there is no due process. In this case, because the detective said, oh, the computer must have gotten it wrong, this is why we got to this scenario. But oftentimes, people don't even know these technologies are being used. And it's not just for identifying someone's unique individual. You have a company called HireView that claims to analyze videos of candidates for a job and take verbal and nonverbal cues trained on current top performers. And so here you could be denied economic opportunity, access to a job because of failures of these technologies. So we absolutely have to keep in mind that there are issues and threats when it doesn't work, and there are issues and threats when it does work. And right now, when we're thinking about facial recognition technologies, it's a high-stakes pattern recognition game, which equates it to gambling. We're gambling with people's faces, we're gambling with people's lives, and ultimately we're gambling with democracy.
So talk about the agencies that you understand are using this. I mean, you've mentioned this in your writing: Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, ICE. Explain how they are using them.
Right. And in addition to that, you also have TSA. So right now we have a wild, wild west where vendors can supply government agencies with these technologies. You might have heard of the Clearview AI case, where you scrape 3 billion photos from the internet, and now you're approaching government agencies, intelligence agencies with these technologies. So they can be used to have investigative leads, right? Or they can be used to interrogate people. So it's not a situation where there is transparency about the scope and breadth of its use, which is another situation where we think about due process, we think about consent, and we think about what are the threats of surveillance.
So, Joy, you have written, we must fight surveillance to protect Black lives. if you can talk about the calls of the Black Lives Matter movement, people in the streets to defund police departments, to dismantle police departments, how does facial recognition technology fit into this?
Absolutely. So when we talk about defunding the police, what we have to keep in mind is when resources are scarce, technology is viewed as the answer to save money, to be more efficient. And what we're seeing are the technologies that can come into play, right, can become highly optimized tools for oppression and suppression. So as we're thinking about how we defund the police, how we shift funds to actually uplift communities, invest in healthcare, invest in economic opportunities, invest in educational opportunities, we have to also understand that as a divestment from surveillance technologies as well.